Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. The Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, testified today before the Senate Intelligence Committee and, as expected, strongly denied that he has had secret or improper interactions with the Russian government.
The suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government to hurt this country, which I have served with honor for 35 years, or to undermine the integrity of our democratic process, is an appalling and detestable lie.
Well, that's what he claims. It's always possible that a high-level Russian defector will appear sometime in the future with documents proving that Jeff Sessions is, in fact, a foreign agent, perhaps of a sleeper cell sent to Alabama during the Cold War and activated at Vladimir Putin's request during the last election. That would be a game-changer. Otherwise, the Russia conspiracy seemed to hit a cul-de-sac this afternoon in the Senate. But that doesn't mean there are no scandals for Congress to investigate. Here's one, maybe the biggest one of all. Our intel services are corrupt, and they're politicized, and they're making it very hard to run the U.S. government. And that may be the point, since they'd clearly like to run it themselves, and they are to some extent. Does that sound like overstatement? Well, consider how much of American politics now revolves around information that's been strategically, often misleadingly and illegally released for political effects. The hearings you watched today are just one example. They took place in part because former FBI Director Jim Comey told senators last week that Sessions may have met Russian Ambassador Kislyak at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington last April. Now, why would Comey think that? Because classified surveillance of Kislyak's conversation suggested it may have happened. That was surveillance released in order to hurt Jeff Sessions, and that, by the way, was apparently false. There are many more examples of this, every day practically. In December, unnamed intelligence sources told the Washington Post that Russia helped Donald Trump win the presidency. A week later, unnamed senior intelligence officials told NBC News that Putin personally was involved in helping Trump win. In February, current and former American officials released the details of a phone call between incoming National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak of Russia. That call was monitored because Kislyak was being spied on. Flynn's name should have been concealed, of course, but it wasn't. It was unmasked and then leaked, and his career and reputation were subsequently destroyed by all that. Trump's private phone call with the president of Mexico, surveilled by American intelligence and then leaked. His call with the Australian Prime Minister, same thing. With Vladimir Putin, again, leaked by the intel community. How could this possibly have advanced American national security interests, which is what they're supposed to be doing? None of it did. It was entirely political. And then in March, as if to prove this point, a half-dozen current and former intel officials told the New York Times how they'd sought to spread classified intelligence information about the Trump campaign as widely as possible throughout government to ensure it would all eventually leak. Now, leaks are as old as government, and sometimes they are welcome. In general, the public ought to know a lot more about government than it does. But we're seeing something new at work here. These are not leaks from political appointees, the kind that form the basis of Bob Woodward's books, the kind we benefit from in journalism a lot. These are strategic leaks, the release of classified intelligence from people whose job it is to collect and safeguard that intelligence. And in that way, it's an utter perversion of the system. We give enormous power to our intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA, the rest of them. We let them listen to our phone calls, read our email, watch us from satellites. We let them do that so they can keep us safe from foreign threats, not so they can pick our political leaders or devise our policies. We have elections to do those things. In a democracy, we're in charge, not them, not unelected bureaucrats. That's changing, and we ought to be worried about that change. But Congress isn't worried because a lot of people there would rather have the policies they prefer than constitutional government. That is worse than immoral. It's a mistake. Once the bureaucracy has shoved aside an elected government, they can easily do it again. And at that point, it's over. Democracy is dead.
Of Otto Warmbier, the sad case, 17 months after he was originally arrested by the North Korean regime, he has finally been returned to his family. His release was announced this morning by the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who provided few details about how exactly it happened. Unfortunately, not all is well, though. Warmbier is in a coma, reportedly has been in one for more than a year. The North Koreans say, and you, of course, cannot trust what they say, that he developed botulism, it's a form of food poisoning, and fell into a coma after taking a sleeping pill. That's what they said. We don't know if that's true. Regardless of the circumstances, though, Fred and Cindy Warmbier have been reunited with their son. We'll have an exclusive interview with the two of them tomorrow from Cincinnati about Otto's release. Despite the release of Otto Warmbier, 3 other Americans do remain imprisoned in North Korea, and the country is still a nuclear threat to the United States. Does this new development mean anything for U.S.-North Korean relations? Rick Grinnell might know. He's the former U.S. spokesman at the UN. He joins us tonight. So, Rick, what can you tell us about the release of Otto Warmbier? We don't have a lot of details.
Well, first of all, this is a total win for diplomacy. This has been happening for a while. My sources have told me that specifically Rex Tillerson brought the case to President Trump in the Oval Office within the first 30 days of President Trump taking over. And President Trump looked at Secretary Tillerson and said, do everything you can. You have the full assets of the U.S. government to get this done. From there was a series of diplomacy. In Norway, we had our diplomats meeting with the Swedes, who do have a post inside North Korea. The Swedes were then allowed to go visit Otto. In that meeting is when the Swedes were able to confirm to the U.S. diplomats that this was a very serious situation, that he was in a coma. From there, we went to the what we call the New York channel for all North Korea diplomacy, and that's because the North Koreans do have a mission to the United Nations, and so we can meet with them up in New York under the auspices of the UN setting. And so U.S. diplomats then met there with the North Koreans, and the North Koreans said, come get them. And a plane went, U.S. government plane with U.S. diplomats landing in North Korea, and they took him out. Now, Tucker, one thing to note here is that he was released. No Taliban prisoners were swapped. No planes full of money were given. This was pure diplomacy by the Trump administration. Rex Tillerson and Donald Trump made this a priority. It wasn't a priority under President Obama. Otto was in a coma for more than a year under the Obama presidency, and he just lingered there. It's really atrocious, and kudos to those who actually believe in diplomacy still.
Yeah, I mean, I'm withholding judgment on some of that. I don't think we have all the details, and I think there are questions about how the State Department under both presidents treated the Warmbier family. We're going to find out a lot more about that tomorrow, but there is the sad coda to the case, which is that he is apparently not well and still in a coma. We'll find out. So what does this mean? Does this suggest...
One thing...
Yes.
One thing just to add, Tucker, is that, diplomacy only works if you have the head of the government, the president of the United States, making it a priority. You can't do other stuff. So, if John Kerry was fighting for this, we don't know about it because it wasn't a priority from the Obama White House.
It was not I can say that for certain, having followed this story for a while. It was not a priority for the Obama White House. It was not a priority for John Kerry. And it's shameful. And I hope it was a priority for the State Department under this president. Does this suggest some changing relationship between North Korea and the United States? Why did they do this now? Was there some incentive offered? And what about the 3 Americans who remain in that country?
Well, first of all, one thing to note is that the State Department actually believes that there are more than 3. The media have been reporting 3, but we have high suspicions that there are other Americans inside there, too. What this really means for diplomacy is it's a good day for diplomacy. Whenever we're able to talk to the North Koreans directly and to, take a small step like this and reassure them that we're going to go, we're going to pick them up, we're going to bring them home, and we thank them for this one little thing, it does begin to build some sort of confidence. We've got a long way to go because the North Koreans are not a rational government, and we, know that they've been trying to put the pieces together for a nuclear program. So we've got some very serious and tough issues faced before us, but the New York channel, when it comes to diplomacy, utilizing that New York channel is a very good thing.
It's a disgusting government run by monsters, and they hurt this boy, and they let him languish in a coma for over a year, and you would love for there to be some way to punish them for that, really punish them for that, but there probably isn't one, is there?
I think there's a whole list of things that the North Koreans should be punished for. This is one of them, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do think, though, that the special relationship that Donald Trump is pushing with the Chinese on, and we have seen some action from the Chinese when it comes to North Korean diplomacy, unlike at any other time, I do think that we can do more to push the Chinese. We haven't considered banking sanctions. We haven't considered some of the really tough sanctions that would get the Chinese government's attention. I think that we should. I think that we should have the full tool belt, so to speak, of the U.S. government at the disposal, because this is a very serious issue, not because of just Otto. but certainly because they are a threat and they have a motive to come at the United States, and they are trying to get the tools to send a missile our way. So I think what we must do is make this a top priority with the Chinese, and we haven't done that enough.
You can't hurt American citizens with impunity, or else, why have a U.S. government, in my opinion. Rick, thanks a lot for joining us. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks, Tucker.